Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com. And today I'm here with Elliot Fishman, CEO of Catapult ERP, and we're trying something a little bit different today. Hey, Elliot.
Hey, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining me. And we're here to just chat briefly before we launch into today's podcast. It is the first in a three-part series. And like I said, we wanted to try something that would take our podcast in a little bit different direction. You and some of the other team members at Catapult were here to really talk all about what the Dynamics 365 cloud strategy is, and you sort of broke it up into a three-part podcast series that begins here.
Yeah, that's right. What we have found in our customer base and in our market is that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of interest and quite a bit of excitement. And we thought it would be worthwhile to get a few people from our organization together to have a bit of a Q&A and talk about what Microsoft's up to and try to surmise where they might be headed.
Yeah, and the timing is really great because things are, even as we speak, really starting to pick up now. It was actually really interesting timing as these Q&As were being recorded for the podcast here. I think right smack in the middle, or right as they were wrapping up, the new naming for what has been Dynamics NAV and what will be sort of its cloud future, sibling or cousin or maybe itself, depending on how you look at it as it matures. It did come out. That's Dynamics 365 Business Central. And so while I don't think it's actually named in the podcast, just because it was literally like a matter of a day or two, I think, that we now know is what will be answering a lot of the questions about what really is in the future for Dynamics 365 on the SMB side, at least on the ERP, in the ERP realm.
Yeah, for sure. The timing was really uncanny because we've been waiting around for quite a while. Microsoft's latest version of NAV, codenamed Tenerife, they held off last November on releasing it. We were expecting a release on the usual schedule, and they held off. There were some vague announcements at the Directions Conference, which is a conference for partners. And so, we expected to see the latest version of NAV be essentially the successor to Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Business Edition. So now we have Microsoft Business Central. Kind of remains to be seen how they harmonize all the different Dynamics 365 ERP offerings. But regardless of where they land from a marketing and naming point of view, what's really exciting and what's really clear is that NAV, or Navision as we've known it, is evolving into this Business Central offering, which is essentially a purely online solution. It's a subscription-based solution deployed in a multi-tenant environment in the cloud. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and going forward, I look forward to catching up with you, and it's going to move fast, but catching up with you and hearing from others in the community about what it really means, what impact and how this new offering will drive discussions and customer decisions in the future. That's probably a topic for the future. But let's just quickly touch on what people can expect from this three-part series. So part one, I'll just mention here is titled Demystifying Dynamics 365 Cloud Strategy. So a range of different topics there from the larger ERP and CRM vision and how Azure ties into it. And then why don't you tell me about part two?
Yeah, so part two really digs deeply into Microsoft Dynamics 365. So this is the brand that Microsoft introduced to denote cloud offerings for enterprise business software. So in the past, we've had Dynamics, and then they were very successful with Office 365. So now they're leveraging the 365 branding and attaching it to Dynamics. And so we go into quite a bit of detail about Dynamics 365 and what it is, how it's delivered, and in particular, what differentiates it from some of the traditional Dynamics product offerings. And it's quite a bit more interesting a story than just moving from on-premise deployment to cloud. There's a real shift towards more process-based applications that are available on a subscription basis. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, really, right time for that conversation. Then I really love the third part, which dives really into Azure, which is more important than ever for a company investing in Microsoft for its business solutions. And you actually bring on a subject matter expert from your team who really focuses on infrastructure, on cloud infrastructure, right?
Yeah, that's right. Dan. Dan is our in-house Azure expert, and Azure is really interesting as well. I mean, at first, we were really seeing it as a cloud platform for infrastructure, primarily a great solution for traditional on-premise clients who owned their licenses for Nav, for example, and wanted to migrate off infrastructure on site to cloud-based infrastructure and manage their costs and reliability better. So still very good for that. But now, as we have Business Central available, and we have a cloud roadmap for traditional Nav customers, I think it'll be interesting to see how many customers take advantage of infrastructure as a service versus moving entirely to a cloud delivery model. But notwithstanding those decisions, there's other interesting aspects of Azure for Dynamics customers, certainly when it comes to integrating identity management and single sign-on and integrating other resources like Office 365 or moving other application workloads to cloud-based infrastructure. So it's definitely a worthwhile listen, whether you run on-premise software and are considering infrastructure as a service or not.
Yeah, in addition to Dan DiTomaso, you have Blair Hurlbut from your team and Jeff Bacon joining you at different points throughout the series. So it's all a great listen. I thank the folks who are already on for checking it out, and I hope everyone enjoys it. And Elliot, thanks for helping me put it together.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It was a fun project, and we're looking forward to doing more podcasting as the story unfolds with Microsoft.
Great. So everyone, enjoy part one. It's coming up right now.
Welcome to a special edition of the Microsoft Dynamics World podcast hosted by Catapult. I'm Elliot Fishman, CEO of Catapult. We're a Microsoft partner located in Vancouver, Canada, focused on implementation, support, and managed services for Microsoft's ERP and CRM solutions. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Jeff Bacon, who's our Vice President of Client Development, and Blair Hurlbut, Vice President of Solution Delivery. Morning, Jeff. Morning, Blair.
Morning, Elliot.
How are you guys this morning?
Not too bad. Monday morning and all that.
Nothing better to start the week than diving into the studio to record a podcast. So lots of interesting things happening at Microsoft these days. I thought I'd start with just sort of a general question. Maybe you can share with us your take on Microsoft's current vision for delivering enterprise software capabilities. Blair.
Yeah, so Microsoft has basically been pushing cloud or hosted infrastructure since about 2010 is when they started to look at putting some business apps up onto the cloud. And now with the release of additional functionality within the D365 environment with D365 for financials and all the other offerings around Power BI, Flow, and some of the other companion applications, their whole vision has been that infrastructure will no longer be hosted by organizations and that Microsoft will do all of the hosting. And then they've also introduced the common data platform, which will now give users the ability to link their enterprise applications through Power BI or Flow or PowerApps if they need a third-party sort of application that can be used internally. And that's what's starting to pull together all of these enterprise applications is the common data model.
You said a lot there, Blair. There's a lot of words maybe our audience doesn't know, but maybe I'll take a stab at it too. I have kind of a slightly different perspective. First and foremost, I think Microsoft's investment I think about 5 years ago in data centers was a pretty massive point in changing their perspective, moving from more traditional office and I'd say mobile and devices type company into what they would call enterprise cloud. And as that, they launched Office 365, which has been getting tons and tons of traction. And now, along with Office 365, which you can buy in various different versions, you can also now buy what they call apps. And these apps are business-focused applications. They're apps like you would typically see on your phone that are available for consumption. But really, I think what's going on is it's a huge commoditization of the software model that they used to have, and they're now basically making business applications available to everybody in relatively kind of an inexpensive way versus what they used to have. So what Blair was saying, that with the addition of D365 Finance, D365 Sales, D365 Service, and Field Service, you can now buy business processes pretty much, for like tens of dollars a month instead of having to invest tens of thousands of dollars to buy this type of capability. So my sense is that's Microsoft's vision. They're making their business apps available just like Outlook was available for everybody, or Hotmail was available for everybody, in a very inexpensive and easy to get way through their data centers, and then loading on their apps onto those data centers and making them publicly available.
Interesting. So it sounds to me like a bit of a shift in the economic model or the business model for how software is packaged and sold, combined with a real meaningful change in the way the technology is actually deployed for end customers. Is it hype in marketing, or is it legitimate? Are these legitimate changes that are going to impact customers? And is Microsoft unique in the market? Are they doing things that are different from, or taking a bit of a different spin on what we've seen in other areas with the move to SaaS, software as a service, and subscription-based pricing? Is this just Microsoft getting on board, or are we seeing a real shift with Microsoft?
I think you said, is it hype? I think it maybe about 5 years ago maybe was a bit of architecture. Microsoft's typically good that way. They're a very good marketing company, and they market before they actually have mature products. But where we're at today is not that. It's actually the way people are looking to consume. It's the way people are looking to buy, the way customers are looking to buy. And in addition to that, the ability to actually get something kind of instant is what humans are used to these days. Basically through iTunes and the app economy, being able to download something and have it work kind of instantaneously is really, I think, the shift and the fundamental shift versus these massive projects that used to occur. So my sense is it used to be a little bit of hype. We, being partners in implementation, we were often told something would work one way, and either that capability didn't exist or it just didn't work that way. Nowadays, it's pretty much out of the box, and things are working from a deployment perspective, at least, relatively well. And I think it's not only here to stay, but I think you're going to see lots of evolution in the way that cloud services are not only deployed but purchased from a customer standpoint.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. And Blair, what's your perspective? Do you think that that terms like ERP and CRM as larger buckets of software capabilities are going to be gone in a few years to be replaced by more business process centric apps? And do you also agree that from a customer's point of view that adopting these kinds of capabilities into your organization is getting easier than it has been in the past with complex implementations and what have you?
Yeah, it definitely seems that the direction that Microsoft is heading is to be able to have all of these best of breed sort of applications and have them work together. You might not realize that you're going to be in a CRM and moving into an ERP in the future. It'll be sort of one platform that you just, as an end user, start to utilize. And then what they're doing from project implementation or being able to adopt these technologies or processes is they're making the setup of these new applications incredibly easy. So it's more wizard-based type setup versus having a 3 to 6 month or year implementation to get some of these applications up and running.
Great. Interesting. One of the things I'm sure customers are interested in is the Dynamics brand itself. It's always been a bit of a confusing brand in my view, a bit of a hodgepodge of products that were acquired from other companies like GP, Nav, AX, CRM, which was developed by Microsoft. Now we still have Dynamics, but we have Dynamics 365 on top of that. So what are you guys' thoughts on the brand and whether is Microsoft making it clear, or is it getting more confusing? What does 365 mean? Jeff?
I agree with you. I think that Dynamics brand it's always been confusing. To be honest, it's probably now more confusing than ever because now that it's shortened to D365. And not only that, there's different flavors of Dynamics, not only just from an application standpoint, but actually from like a process perspective. So you've got more products under this Dynamics suite than ever. My belief is I think they're likely to do away with this Dynamics brand, or at least if I was in marketing, I would, and simply call it D365 to kind of complement the O365, which it kind of indicates that you're always on, you're always having your application available, and you always have your Office suite available, 365 days a year. So my estimation is that is a confusing brand and always has been. I don't get it. Maybe our customers do, but they always ask us, what is this Dynamics? So my hope is anyway that they kind of consolidate it under D365 and O365, but maybe Blair, you have a different perspective.
No, I agree. I think it is pretty confusing to the end users and even the partner channel to a degree. And I think that's exactly what you're going to see. There's going to be some sort of rebranding either into the just O365, because those two environments are going to start working more and more closely together in the future. And maybe the D365 brand goes away and it just talks about the Office 365, because that's one of the larger plays for Microsoft, is to have people on Office 365 or O365. And then the move to be able to add on all of these other applications might just happen through that particular environment.
I think we should be in marketing at Microsoft.
Well, they probably have a pretty big team of their own.
Exactly.
So that's Dynamics 365, which we understand is the business solutions analog to Office 365, software as a service, online web-based delivery of enterprise software capabilities. If that's the case, then let's talk about Azure for a second. So Azure is Microsoft's public cloud services platform. How does it tie into Dynamics and enterprise software delivery? Is it relevant for Dynamics customers?
Yeah, I think so. So there's a couple different ways, that we leverage it. I'd have to say I'm certainly not an expert on all of the Azure-based services because they're actually adding more capabilities to that platform every single day. But specifically how it relates to Dynamics is a few different ways. One, we have a lot of kind of historical on-premise applications or deployments. Obviously, moving into the cloud is an important strategy for many customers. Migrating to the cloud using an Azure-based platform allows them to get away from the boxes and wires type scenario. So the first thing that I see is it's relevant in that it allows the basically end user or customer to get rid of kind of procuring hardware every 3 to 5 years, which is a nice thing. Allows them to scale that hardware really, really quickly. And what I see is kind of also somewhat relevant, but maybe not as spoken about, is it actually is kind of taking away a bit of the workforce from having an on-premise IT staff into somebody that is maybe a little bit more consulting or something that's doing some managed services around maintaining that environment. So that Azure-based platform is quite relevant from a virtualization standpoint. And it also allows a company or individuals, if they wanted to basically to rent software that particular application runs on. So it's again changing the model in which we used to transact on, and actually making it pretty easy for people to spin up environments, pay for those environments, and then spin those down quickly as well. So it's totally relevant in Dynamics because obviously we had stuff running 24/7 that we didn't need to. We had large storage kind of components on data. That's now being more rationalized and maintained. Things are in the cloud so that we're getting rid of boxes and moving hardware across continents to support these types of applications as well. Yeah.
Sounds great. Blair, from your perspective, what's been the experience so far in migrating customers from on-premise implementations where they have racks of servers located in their offices to Azure? Has it been pretty smooth, and are the results pretty seamless from a user experience point of view?
Yeah, we've had a number of clients move from being on-prem onto Azure because they had some aging infrastructure servers that were 5 years or so in age, and it was time to move them over. And what it's also allowed them to do is to maintain multiple ways to access the environments, which they may not have had with their old infrastructure. So we now have people who can deploy web clients or access it out in the field versus just being an in-house sort of application. The speed that we've seen with the majority of our implementations has actually improved based on the infrastructure that people used to have in-house. And one of the other things that Jeff didn't really touch on is also the ability for organizations that might not want to go fully into a cloud environment, is that they can still have a private cloud with Azure themselves versus being in a tenanted environment where there's maybe 50 other customers running on the same server that you are right now. It's something that I think is applicable to some organizations that have issues around their data going out onto a public cloud versus having the option to have a private cloud. And one of the other reasons that Azure is still very important is that a lot of the product that Microsoft still has, some of the legacy products, aren't 100% ready to be consumed, such as Dynamics NAV today within a completely hosted environment, unlike the CRM, which can go completely to the cloud. So it still has this interim sort of step for people that want to be able to deploy something like Dynamics Nav out onto Azure and have it in the cloud versus having the infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting component too. We've seen a lot of mixed mode deployments of Active Directory, where instead of moving everything into the cloud, we actually have a lot of clients still running AD on premise, but synchronizing to single sign-on because they're using Office 365. So as things are migrating, we're starting to see kind of interesting things emerging, like hybrid type deployments where certain things are on premise because we can't move them into the cloud, and things that are in the cloud where it makes sense. So it kind of supports Microsoft's vision, right, of customer choice. You don't have to be one or the other. You can still support on premise versus cloud, or do both. Based on where you're at and what technologies you have in your environment.
Well, it sounds like a good time as a customer to be looking at your roadmap and considering all your options. It seems to me like from everything you've said that as a customer you have a lot more choice and a lot more possible paths than you did before, and opportunity to really tailor make your experience to exactly what your needs are. So in reference to that, where do you think we are relative to Microsoft's vision? Is it are we still in the sort of early adopter phase? Is this just bleeding edge companies that are a little more risk oriented should jump on, but everybody else should wait a little while? What's coming down the road, or are we kind of further down if we look at this from the point of view of the classic innovation cycle? Are we in the early majority adoption phase, or are we starting to transition into more late majority? Where are we in this evolution?
From a client perspective, I would say the majority of our clients are now asking for it to go on to a hosted Azure environment, or what are the availability to have a subscription-based software. If we would have asked those same questions a couple of years ago, or if we would have suggested moving to something like Azure, the way that the customers or clients looked at it back then to how they look at it today, it's more of a necessity today than it was just a few years ago.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I used to think cloud was a thinly disguised veil for virtualization, right? Like we've had virtualization available for a long time. Maybe not in a mass type environment like Microsoft data centers, but through various different partners, you could always have hosted infrastructure. That's not what's happening here. This is everybody that thinks about software these days is thinking about cloud. They're asking for subscriptions. It's here to stay, and it's certainly going to be the way forward. I don't think it's kind of early adopters. It is now the sharp end of the hockey stick. It's going straight up, and people are migrating, and anybody who has kind of older infrastructure is just kind of waiting for that investment to die and moving on to the cloud. So yeah, that's what I think. I think we're in the thick of it, and it's going to continue.
Awesome. One other thing I was just thinking about as you talked about that is what we've traditionally called ISV partners in the Microsoft Dynamics channel. Software companies, independent software companies that make products which add functionality or capabilities. Probably I couldn't guess as to how many there are, but certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that make software like that have to keep it up to date and as Microsoft evolves. What's the impact of this shift to Dynamics 365 and Azure on ISV partners? I've also heard of AppSource, and I understand that there's a new way to acquire additional capabilities. What do you make of all of that, Jeff?
Well, first of all, I think it's changing the way they develop their applications. It used to be that they would develop new capabilities and release those in accordance to Microsoft's major version release. But because of the cloud and the way things are moving, Microsoft's moved to basically 2 major releases every year, rather than like bundling up for like once every 3 years or so. So first and foremost, really changed the dynamic of the way ISVs need to operate and need to stay ahead of the curve with regards to what's coming down the pipe for the platform that they're developing for. Second of all, which I think is an important factor, I think it's really changing their economics. So what I think we are seeing in this environment is that those ISVs that are kind of well funded are around, and they're still functioning and transacting on a cloud-based or recurring revenue type model. Whereas I think the others that were kind of more opportunistic and just selling software, so to speak, those are going away or being gobbled up by the other players because of the revenue model, and the economics of it have really changed. So so I think we're seeing consolidation in the ISV, which is great. I think we're seeing some better capabilities through the larger players or the ones that are more kind of more accepted in the marketplace. And then in addition to that, I think we're seeing capabilities and kind of stronger development coming out of that channel as well. So I think it's all good, to be honest. But Blair, you might have a different perspective on that as well.
No, I have the same perspective on what's happening to the current ISV community. But what we're starting to see with having a more open API structure with the new products that Microsoft's releasing in Dynamics 365, we're starting to see a lot more large ISVs coming into the market. You see people like Expensify, ADP, Ceridian are now building integrations to these platforms because they see that the reach for these platforms are going to be much larger than what they are today. And so that's starting to improve the ISV community so that there's a lot more opportunity and a lot of different applications that are going to be exposed and be able to integrate back into the suite of D365 products moving forward. So I think it's pretty impressive the number of new ISVs that have come into the market since the D365 for financials has been released. And the on-premise product has also benefited from some of these changes because some of them will actually get pushed down onto the on-prem instance of that software.
That's cool. And the other thing that I saw actually, what occurred to me is with the you mentioned it early on in the conversation, Blair, but with the introduction of PowerApps, I'm actually seeing some of the smaller type ISVs being replaced by the ability to DIY it through PowerApps. So I saw this really cool price calculator and tax calculator just online. So you download it and you can actually play with it and publish it yourself through something called PowerApps that connect to your ERP or CRM data through APIs, which again is a real big shift in the way that traditional ERP and CRM was actually managed and integrated with.
Well, a lot of changes. Hopefully, our listeners have learned as much as I have in this conversation. We just finished talking about ISV partners. Let's bring things to a close. I'm curious about your thoughts about the role of the partner in Microsoft's vision. What we might have traditionally called the VAR, or the value-added reseller, the services company that helps the customer adopt, implement, and support an ERP or CRM solution. Does Microsoft envision a different kind of partner, or coming from Catapult, a partner organization? What are your thoughts on how the business needs to evolve in order to help customers maximize the value they get from these investments in SaaS-based ERP capabilities? Jeff?
It's a good question. I think it's much different these days. I'll just give you an example. Internally, we've hired an infrastructure specialist with the idea that very often in implementations, for example, we would leave infrastructure off the table, or we'd miss some important factor of how the solution is supported by the hardware, software that the application's running on. What we've seen as our IS person has started to get into work a little bit more, and as cloud services get added, is his job is actually a lot different than what we anticipated. We're seeing him be more responsible for oncoming cloud-based services. How does cloud work with kind of hybrid type environments? How does Nav or CRM work with Office 365? How do we actually even think about these things together in an implementation, because there's so much more dependency on them? So I think really it's a good indication about where we need to head as partners, and that is being a lot more thoughtful about the platform and how capabilities are rolling out and how they intersect with each other in order for us to be good advisors to our clients and customers. I guess we could stick to our knitting, but I don't believe that's Microsoft's vision. I think there's more opportunity for partners to actually get more into the stack and get more into the platform itself, as opposed to just simply sticking to these applications. For sure, there's going to be specialists all over the place, but I think as kind of a traditional VAR evolves, we need to start thinking about other services and how it relates to the what we call services that Microsoft is putting out into the marketplace, and then how do we help our customers make sense of it all? Because it's expanded the role of our jobs, I think, but it's also added a lot more complexity to customers when they're trying to focus running their business, as opposed to trying to make sense of all of the words that are getting thrown around in our technology-based businesses.
Yeah, I think you've raised something really interesting there. If I can paraphrase, I think that it sounds like you're saying that the shift to software as a service and subscription-based access to enterprise software capabilities has really changed things from a customer point of view. Insofar as they now want to pay for value or outcomes rather than owning a piece of software and then having to maintain it. The software is maintained somewhere else. They pay for a subscription. They own their data. How does the partner? Blair, maybe I'll ask you. What are your thoughts about how does the partner support that vision? How does the partner effectively make sure that the customer is getting the end results, not just access to the software, but that they get that software driven into their business and adopted by their users, and they get the value. Are there opportunities to go further than we've seen in the past with traditional implementations and traditional approaches to support?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the main focuses moving forward for partners, is being that value add component. The way that clients are consuming or purchasing software now just as a service or looking for an outcome, it's typically easier for them to switch applications. So I think the long-term play from Microsoft is, yes, we need to get this in, but now we also need to make sure that their financials are running, they're moving along. What are the other complementary pieces of software that us as VARs can add on to this ERP or CRM that will help our clients be more efficient and more effective, making sure that they meet those internal processes or outcomes that they have moving forward. And I think that's a big shift to just project-based implementations that VARs were used to in the past.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I had a pretty good had a beer with one of our Microsoft partners in the channel the other day, and he mentioned that his compensation model is all based on adoption, whereas it used to be Microsoft used to be based on just revenue or sales, but now it's based on not only getting the application in, but actually users adopting it and using it. So I think there's a huge shift in an expectation that partners will help clients not only get the software in, but also start using it and getting it adopted into their organizations.
Well, it sounds like a real alignment of interest between the software manufacturer, the customer, and the partner. So definitely interesting times ahead. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts this morning. I think this is a good time to take a break. As I said, this will be a 3-part podcast series, so we'll be back with a deeper dive into Office 365 and capabilities in our next episode. Join us next time. We're going to get into Dynamics 365 from its inception and its capabilities to how it differentiates from the legacy products and what that means for users. Until then, go out there, research the products online, tons of good information. For more insights and thoughts, check out the Catapult blog, www.catapulterp.com. For more insights and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates on ebooks and additional podcasts. Look forward to speaking with you next time.